for those of us that are really about the life, it's our church. It's our place of worship. Wednesdays at APT was the place where I really began to establish myself as an individual. But even though I adapted it, I never left the records alone.
Clearly.
Hey there, it's me, Roxy Cottontail. You might know me as a DJ, artist, designer, and New York City party promoter, or from my bunny logo. I'm putting all that on the table and writing about the years that transformed music and the New York City scene. I've interviewed 250 friends and colleagues I admire. I ask all and reveal all. Please join me and the Tales to rediscover the 90s and the Y2K magical landscape of music, art, technology, and streetwear. This is Roxy's Tales.
I wanted to talk to you, Rich Medina, about the Remedy, I guess, starting in Philly, like how you began as a DJ, and like walk me through that and then coming to New York.
Honest to God, I've been DJing since I was 9-10 years old.
My guest this week on Roxy's Tales is the legendary Rich Medina, a Philadelphia DJ who brought the curated music of Philly and his influence to New York City in the early 2000s at APT, the celebrator of Fela Kuti, the Dante's Hi-Fi ringleader, 1/5 of the originals, and possibly the vinyl king of the East Coast. Rich and I discuss all that and more. Get ready to get lost in the sauce of Little Ricky's Rib Shack. Without further ado, an honor and a privilege to present Rich Medina.
I was swimming in the craft like before I even knew what the fuck was going on. You know what I mean? And it all started for me then. And I was doing Sadie Hawkins dances at my middle school, and you know, we were chasing all of the guys around our way that were doing b-boy shit. You know, at the end of the day, I was one of those kids that made that type of decisions. It was basketball and b-boying, you know, and DJing is a natural component of that. And that's not some like, you know, outrageous claim of having been doing some big significant stuff, but I was playing records in front of people for entertainment at a
before puberty even.
Yeah.
And the first paid gigs?
The first time I played records in a club where you had to be 21 to enter was towards the end of 1992. Mm-hmm. And that was also here in Philly. King Britt and Dazia gave me and DJ Mike Nice an opportunity to play at Silk City.
So walk me through what, you know, I guess how you collected your records. Was there like a lot of the stores in Philly, Jersey, New York?
Yeah, I mean,
where were you going?
I'm from Lakewood, New Jersey. So we were going to the local Crazy Eddie. You know, we would go to Englishtown or Eatontown to go to Crazy Eddie. We would go to Elizabeth to go to Vogel's. We would go any and everywhere that there was piles of records, you know. It wasn't this anomaly that people had records in their household. You know, elders in the family were not necessarily digging people, but they were music people. You know what I mean? So you're also coming off of the taste that's being presented to you in your household, in the household of people who your family associates with, aside from what we were learning, being creative away from the family structure. The first 150, 200 records in my collection, I boosted from my family. You know, I was buying records for myself. First record I bought with my own money was Kiss Alive 2. Started to understand the difference between metal and classic rock, yacht rock, Blue Eyed Soul, and all those different categories that come under just that one space. The doorway to all of that for me was Kiss.
Beautiful. In the 90s too, because I'm covering the 90s as a foundation. Where else were you playing?
In the 90s, I would, every once in a while, I would get a chance to do a cameo on 89 Tech 9 with Bobito and Stretch. I was playing at Silk City Diner off and on via King Britt. I was playing at places like the 5 Spot. Me, Mike Nice, El Boogie, my man Randy. We had a mobile crew called Soundboy Entertainment. So there was a lot of New Yorkers going to school in Philly in that window, you know, from 92 to 96. So house parties that were being put on by New York cats who were in Philly. A lot of Black Greek letter organization parties via Temple and Penn and LaSalle. While we were making our entry into the club world in Philly, we had a pretty good posture in the mobile DJ community.
So how did you go about meeting Cosmo?
I met Cosmo basically roughly the same time I met Questlove, and I met both of them at a shop in Philadelphia called The Layup. I met them honestly, through the music, through just this community of DJs and dancers and artists that I fell into when I moved to Philadelphia. And they were some of my earliest friends and remain some of my closest friends to this day.
How did the Remedy begin?
The Remedy was started by Cosmo and another good friend of ours by the name of Jack Boogie. At the same time that they were starting the Remedy, I was starting Footwork with Bobito. Bob had the New York store.
Yes.
And he tapped me to be his partner in Philadelphia, and we opened Footwork in Philadelphia. So this is end of 96, early 97. At the same time that we were opening Footwork, Tony Shiro was opening Fluid. Me, Cosmo, all the usual suspects, John L., Holotronics, Diesel Boy, Nigel Richards when he was more active, Josh Wink, the whole Ovum crew, all of them. Fluid was that place in Philadelphia that represented this wide palette of programming, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And the Remedy really began as King Britt and Dazia were ending Back to Basics at Silk City. It was a Monday night party. It had been tradition in Philly for as long as anybody could remember. And when Daz and King disbanded that night, the Remedy popped up in its place. So it was started by Jack and Cosmo and Renan Motley. I was one of the most frequent guests. I was a frequent guest constantly. And then Cosmo was in a life-threatening accident. It was in a hit and run on Rittenhouse Square, almost lost his leg. And I just took control of the party while he was down until he could get back on his feet and actually get back out in the world. And when he got back out in the world, they asked me to stay on board. The rest is history, The Remedy just really like skyrocketed off of that. Just him making it through what he made it through was a big part of the success of the event. People want to see people come back from tough shit.
Yeah.
So when Kaz got back on his feet, the city was wrapped around us. The hip hop community and the dance community and the digging community in Philadelphia had themselves wrapped around us.
Were you on Soul Strut? Were you on any of these message boards that were big on for vinyl collecting?
We were on those blogs, but we weren't on them to promote our events. We were on them as digging guys.
Yeah.
Beyond that, it was really, this is Earthlink AOL days. So it was really for us, like, give us your email address and we'll keep you informed about what we got coming up if you enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
So it was the baby steps of just the fundamental utilization of the technology at hand at the time.
And so I assume through Bobito is how APT happened for you?
DJ Language and I were playing at a little bar in the base of the Manhattan Bridge called Good World. And then we kind of outgrew it. It was a little tiny shoebox of a place, but it just got big. And then we got approached by another LES venue called Fun. And we moved the party to Fun. And that's where we really went crazy with the email list, because the whole time we were at Good World, I was sending somebody around the room every hour collecting email addresses. So when we started promoting Fun, we went from a room that holds 45 people legally to a room that holds 600 people legally. And we were getting anywhere from 900 to 1,000. The two guys that had barely established their names in New York as established DJs, but we had this momentum behind us.
Yeah, how did you meet Language?
I met Language because he was friends with the owner of Good World, and I had been playing there for about 3 or 4 months. And one day I walk in there and there's this dude plugging my turntables into the mixer. I was like, who the fuck are you? You know, why are you touching my shit? He explains, you know know anything about Josh, gentleman of the highest order. So, he explained that like only Josh can explain. I'm a friend of, I can't even remember homegirl's name, the owner. I'm a friend of hers. She told me I could play tonight. I was like, oh, I got a bone to pick with that, because this is my night. I drive here from Philadelphia to do this. I drive here with 2 turntables and a mixer in my sister's car that I borrow to do this. So as far as I'm concerned, you're not doing shit tonight. I need to talk to homegirl. And that was my first experience with like negotiating to hold my slot. She didn't mean anything by it. She wasn't trying to be dismissive of me. She was just giving another friend of hers a shot in her place. But there's no protocols. You know what I'm saying? There's no spoken rules about how shit's done. You're lucky we letting you play here. And they kind of had that attitude. And I almost had the disposition like I was going to take my turntables and leave. I felt disrespected. But I toughed it out, for the long game. Homeboy played. He was cool about it. I was uptight. I was pissed off. And he handled it. He handled it really calmly and gracefully. And I really appreciated that. So it ended up being this really cool partnership. It took instead of feeling like somebody was invading my space, it felt like it was cutting my workload. Yeah. Now I can socialize a little bit more. Now I can do some of the other work that I got to do as a non-New Yorker to make these New York cats know who the fuck I am and to take me seriously beyond being Bobito's homeboy.
Nick Ketchstubs, he mentioned Language being like a barometer of cool in the early 2000s. And I believe that to be very true.
The guy's encyclopedic, he's just one of those type of thinkers. The way he absorbs information, it's extremely itemized and detail oriented. So when he talks about music, he can talk about all the layers of the onion. He can even talk knowledgeably about stuff that he doesn't know, which is a really difficult art to deal with. We stopped working at Fun as APT was opening.
Okay.
And Language was friends with Ray and Alex DeRuggiero and Kim Bucci and everybody that was on the front of that sled. And Bobito was also associated with them and got pulled in because of what he obviously represented for New York at the time. And I believe both of those guys had been playing there for maybe a month. And the venue started asking questions about other DJs they can hire. And I was one of the guys that they brought up. And they offered me a Wednesday night. Wednesdays at APT was the place where I really began to establish myself as an individual selector in New York. I think I was there for 9.5 years. I would say at least for the first 5 to 6 years, I didn't have any guests.
Wow.
I was on the set, tail to snout. I was in there at 9 o'clock when the bartenders and barbacks were cutting limes and lemons. And I was picking up glasses at the end of the night, helping to clean up the place.
So I dated Ryan Virag for a period 2002. So I was there a lot, Small Change, Spam, Ray,
Man,
Gabby, Patrick Duffy, who I think I told you I also spoke to.
All of those cats, man. Ryan and Craig at the bar. Ryan, Craig, and Spam were just like
drink machine.
They were magic at the bar, man. They were really magic at the bar because they had a really bugged out ability to respond to the room in this like really visceral way. Like I remember vividly, there would be moments where you would play a record and the room would really respond, like wholesale. The room was like on your page. And I just remember vividly Ryan and Spam like picking up handfuls of napkins like this big and just flinging napkins into the, you know, like that was their thing of how they showed the room that they were with us.
Were there other nights that you had beside Wednesdays at APT?
Yes, I also started my Jump and Funk party in August of 2001.
Mm-hmm.
Jump and Funk is my tribute to Fela Kuti and the legacy of Fela Kuti and Afrobeat music. We started Jump and Funk as basically an information session, an after work information session, basically giving out propaganda about Fela Kuti because we were the marketing tool for the Black President exhibit, which was curated by Trevor Schumacher at the New Museum in 2002. So in 2001, we started Jump and Funk as a way to raise awareness about who Fela Kuti is and why he's the most important Black artist in the world that you may not know shit about. You know, we inspired the Broadway play. We inspired a lot of Afrobeat bands or a lot of funk and soul bands to look into Afrobeat and to begin to make Afrobeat music. We brought a lot of pioneers out of the closet, developed relationships with, you know, your Soundwave records and your Comet records and your Hot Casa records and Voodoo Funk and all these African record collectors worldwide. Start buying records from these cats and really developing an arsenal of African music that I never knew that I would be considered.
I mean, now it's like mainstream radio.
It's as pop as it gets now.
Yeah.
So it's a blessing to be able to say that you're part of introducing the world to that.
Was that monthly?
That was monthly.
Uh-huh.
Initially, we would play from 7 to 11 on Thursdays, and then at 11, we started at Shine on Canal and West Broadway.
Wow, I love Shine.
Gingy Brown was the engineer. And every month at 11 o'clock, Giant Step and Ron Trent would roll into Shine and just kind of big brother us out of the way until, 3 or 4 months into the party had grown such good legs that the venue ended up giving us our own night. So rather than playing before Giant Step, then we had a weekend night of our own.
Nice. Do you have any wild stories from APT?
I just remember the amount of bud that was getting smoked in that room was on another level, man. Like you could barely see in there. It was so smoky.
Do you recall a lot of the task force coming through?
I remember when places like Spice Market and 10 June started opening up in the area, and all of a sudden you have 5-star establishments in the meatpacking district. And, in New York, when you start dealing with 5-star, you're not dealing with security teams. You're basically dealing with police and bonded security.
Yeah.
And, in New York, that's the real mafia. So I remember the task force coming around vividly because they were nitpicking.
Yeah.
They were looking for infrastructure flaws that they could point at as reasons for them to apply themselves and insert themselves in the situation. But yeah, we were rocking in a sterilized New York, 42nd Street got shut down, street vendors got shut down, the reintroduction of the cabaret laws.
Yeah. Mid 2000s is when the rent, you couldn't afford to even live in Manhattan.
Couldn't live over there no more.
Yeah.
And soon venues like APT, even though they were owned by the Petrosian family, they couldn't continue to stock the basement bar. And you got restaurant folks that haven't developed the right civic relationships and haven't been doing the right $50 handshakes all along. And then the guys that you're just missing on the civic side come to get theirs. And when they come to get theirs after you've ignored them, they're taking way bigger chunks than they would have if you had just cooperated off the rip. So the place kind of folded under the pressure of inexperience from the top down.
Yeah. And I know that the, you know, digital transition was not fully appreciated at APT. Did you make that switch?
I was a late adapter, but you know, when we first started at APT, you had 2 mismatched turntables, a CD Walkman with an aux cord in it. You know, then they put the Function One in there and built a DJ booth and put a proper rig in there. And all of a sudden we have access to CDJs. You could be stubborn and stick to analog, but the CDJs definitely opened up the palette in terms of what you could rock. And it opened up the palette in terms of hearing things at a really loud volume without them being messy and getting feedback. But even though I adapted it, I never left the records alone.
Clearly.
I wasn't one of the guys that sold my records. It's like, it's undeniable that you got more tricks up your sleeve with this platform. And you got guys who are doing some pretty interesting stuff that made you see the value in it.
Yeah.
It wasn't a convenience thing for me.
The night of Obama's inauguration being in a night at your party?
I mean, it was a landslide moment for the United States. And here we are, essentially the day of, me next to Q-Tip on stage at one of the biggest new venues in the city, throwing an event in celebration of that. So yeah, it was electric, man.
Yeah.
It was electric.
What about 9/11? Where were you?
9/11, I was flying to the East Coast from LA.
Wow.
And strangely, I managed to get my flight switched from JFK to Philadelphia without penalty. And I flew into Philadelphia on the 10th. I think, yeah, the 9th, the night of the 9th. I think it was maybe like 3 weeks to a month after 9/11. I don't know if it was an email thread or a group text or something like that, but there was this conversation about the idea of like just everybody coming together and getting together at the venue. And it happened on a Wednesday. And I still got the DVD cam footage driving into New York with the fog lights and all the smoke still smoldering around the buildings. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah, I was gonna ask how like returning to DJing came about for you.
It was a double-edged sword, you know, because you're like, well, if we throw an event, maybe it'll make people feel good. And at the same time, you're like, how can I throw an event? You know, New York just lost 5 figures worth of bodies in a war crime.
Yeah.
But then I think the purpose of what we do and the intent of what we do kind of outweighed the star quality aspect of it. And it just became a way for people to come get a release. You know, maybe people aren't going to church, but maybe going out to hear some music somewhere and try to start inching their way back towards some kind of normalcy. I believe that our craft became a space of peace and freedom for people, gave people something to feel good about after 9/11 and a way to fast track themselves back to their old way of life. And if there's anything that New York has brought to the world, is celebrating and using music and entertainment as a means to get through tough times. For those of us that are really about the life, it's our church. It's our place of worship. It's where we go to find our higher selves. although we do it as sinners, you know, we got to get to some low points to get to the high. But, you know, how else do you know you're living if you're not out there in the elements, dealing with the elements and trying to get to your higher self? And I think that a lot of what we bring to the table as DJs and as event people and as people in production, we're vested in the idea of representing a good time and representing an opportunity to let your hair down. So as much as we feel guilty coming back out in the world to party after such a travesty, what else can you do except try to get yourself back to some level of normalcy?
Yeah.
And thank God people found a lot of value in what we were bringing to the table. The phenomenon that was taking place at the beginning of the 21st century in New York sparked a new interest in the craft. And the government and civic spaces began to engage us in a different way as a part of what New York is.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to be one of the DJs in that time that was getting those calls and getting those opportunities to represent the city on a higher scale.
I love
Hopefully.
the ebbs and flows of, you know, your time period or your story in this time period. It's good stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate being included.
Yeah, thank you for giving me some time.
No doubt, anytime.
Thanks for hopping by. That's it for this week. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, comment, and stalk. Bounce, little kitty.